I can't believe it's been 3 years since I've started this channel. Quite a few things have changed and there's a lot I would tell myself if I could go back in time. Obviously I can't do that, but what I can do is tell you. So in this video I will spill the beans on everything I know about making YouTube videos. The video will be split up into 4 main and 1 bonus chapter. First, we'll be talking about getting ideas, the scripting, which is writing down the entire video, and prep work for filming. Then we'll go into the production part, which will focus on everything related to capturing these images, and then post-production, which mostly contains editing as well as possible reshoots before arriving at chapter 4, which is distribution and covers the publication on YouTube itself and spreading the news on other social platforms. In the bonus chapter, I'm going to go over some numbers so you get an idea of what a 20k channel pulls in, and some other general opinions of mine, like what it feels like to be doing this after 3 years, and my opinion on YouTube in general. Before we get started, I want to be very clear that I'm in no way a professional, although as a friend of mine, good old Mr. L just recently told me, if you make money from it, you are a professional. However, I'm just going to ignore that. I'm also only familiar with the types of videos that I am making, which are about products, so keep that in mind. But regardless, I hope after watching this you can take away 1 or 2 things that could work for you, or at least give you an insight into the inner workings of this operation. But enough said, let's begin. Every YouTube video obviously starts with an idea. In my case, it's often about a product or a product that gave me a new experience, in which case the experience is the focus and how that particular product enabled it. Regardless of which case it ends up being though, the most important factor is that you yourself are interested in whatever you're making a video about. If not, it's gonna be bad for multiple reasons. For example, you will start to hate making the video halfway through. Trust me, I know. And your audience will notice it too, so pick wisely. When I started, there was also a lot of talk about picking a niche, and I do agree to a certain degree that you need to choose one, eventually, but especially at the beginning, I don't think it matters all that much. Much more important is again that you pick something that you like, and if it changes along the way, switch to whatever the new thing is. You're gonna want to avoid being stuck making videos about something that you don't care about anymore, which is the equivalent of having a day job that you hate and keep doing because you are too afraid to change. Again, trust me, I know. So pick whatever you are most interested in, something you could talk forever about, something you seemingly never get boring of. That's your starting point, and for me, it was and still is tech. Before I begin with the script, I obviously have to test or play around with whatever I'm making a video about, and I usually try to do this for at least a couple of weeks. During that time, I jot down anything that I want to mention in a simple bullet list. Once it starts to take shape, a general message emerges. For the PlayStation Portal, this was unrealized potential, or that's what I felt most during my testing. If you haven't watched that video yet, in a nutshell, the Portal is great, but it has so much, well, unrealized potential. Sony isn't overselling it, and I think most people's frustration, including mine, is that we all wanted more. Anyway, after having that list, I usually create the chapters. Just like in this video, I try to separate everything into segments so it's a little easier to digest. It also helps me to focus on aspects one by one so I don't flare out too much during the writing process. The initial bullet list can also be helpful for another reason. Sometimes I simply forget about things, and this helps me make sure to report all my findings. I then begin with the actual writing process, which literally includes every word that will be spoken in a video. Some people have the capability of just talking freely about a topic and recording themselves doing so. I am not one of those people. If you've never done something like this, it can be a bit daunting at first. I remember my earlier days when I had more than one occasion where I just sat there and stared at the screen for hours, not knowing what to write. The way I approach it these days is to ask myself, what would I love to know about this? What are the things that I wish somebody would have told me? And then I literally do that. I sit in front of the screen and out loud tell the story to myself, and that is what I write down. This was a very difficult process at first, and sometimes, especially with this video, it can still be a challenge. The only way to get through it is to get through it. Practice makes perfect, and it's a recurring theme you'll be hearing in this video. Something I rarely hear being talked about, though, is the structure of the script. I mostly try to avoid making a fool out of myself, but here I'm gonna jump into the deep end and pretend I know something about writing by analyzing the script of this video in the hopes of giving you some more insights. If anyone is a scholar of the written form, I apologize. I have no idea what I'm talking about. But let's try this anyway. Let's go back to the beginning. First, we have a very short opening that states my intention for this video and what I call an outlandish statement, which in this case was the sentence, "I will spill the beans and everything I know about making YouTube videos." This serves a simple purpose, and that is to tickle your curiosity. I know making YouTube videos has this mystery about it, and many, including myself, want to know how to get started. By saying that I will spill the beans, I sort of hint that there is a secret. Maybe it's the thing that you didn't know about and prevented you from starting your own channel up until now. Is that the case though? Well, we'll have to watch to find out. The second part is an overview of the entire video itself. It's like that first slide on a business presentation with all the talking points. Again, it's here to inform you about what I will be covering so that you can decide whether or not it's worth your time, while simultaneously luring you in with another piece of sugar, which in this case is me mentioning money. This is again something a lot of people are always interested in. How much money do YouTube videos actually make? So by saying that I will be covering this, I hopefully got your attention to continue watching, or at least make you jump to that section. Only after this, the actual video begins, and here too I try to keep you interested by making it personal. Specifically, I wrote which is the equivalent of having a day job that you hate and keep doing because you are too afraid to change. Again, trust me, I know. Now what I'm trying to achieve here is to hopefully establish a personal connection with you. I'm taking a bit of a gamble here by assuming that you don't like your day job, and by saying, trust me, I know, I state that I'm in the same situation. Like in any other story, I hope that with small personal reveals like this, I create a bit of a bridge between us, at least enough for you to want to hear what I have to say. If you're at this point thinking this sounds like mind manipulating paint by numbers writing, it is not. Don't ever construct a script by rules, it's going to sound like a robot wrote it. What you are hearing here is exactly what came out when I asked myself what I would want to hear, and hating something that you do reminded me of my day job, and thus I used it as an example. The effect, if it worked, is first relatability and second authenticity, which is another very important part. If you're not honest with your audience, they will notice and they will call it out. But bear in mind that your issues and struggles aren't going to align with everybody. Some people will see themselves in you or parts of you, and others will think you're full of, well, let's say cheese. Once you've finished your initial draft, mine usually are around 3,000 to 4,000 words, I do a couple of revisions and always sleep over it. Never finish writing and immediately start voice recording. Chances are extremely high that you missed something or that certain sentences don't make sense, at least that's the case with me. The whole process usually takes around 7 to 10 hours in total and is spanned across a week until I'm done and move on to the next part, which is prepping for the shoot. This begins by creating a shot list, which is a list of all the scenes that I need for the video. I do this by once again reading everything out loud and just writing down what I imagine I would like to see on screen, while hearing myself, which sounds weird, I know. After I've done that, I will sort the list so I can shoot as much back to back as I can, because nothing is more important to me than efficiency when it comes to filming. For example, if we take keyboard content, I might shoot all the fancy B-roll first, then record one sound demo of the bass configuration before filming the disassembly. Then I will usually change the configuration, like the switches, or remove the foam before I put everything back together, so I can record the alternative sound profile right after. This way I only have to open up the board once, which saves me a lot of time. So thinking about which order I need to shoot in can overall reduce the production time quite significantly, which is where we are headed next. Every time somebody asks me for tips on filming, my first response is always the same: light. It's one of the most crucial elements and is a piece of equipment you shouldn't skimp on. I know cameras can be sexy and are probably the most drawn to or asked about item, but don't underestimate the importance of your key light. Then there are the secondary lights. In my case, I only ever use this small NAND light tube to assist my main source. It can make quite a difference, and in a closed-off environment, it's plenty to get some interesting shots or play around with shadows. Both are crucial in setting up a scene though, which is a process that takes up the majority of the time during filming. I do everything on my dedicated shooting table, and I have a few different backdrops to change the look of the video. The yellow one is dedicated to a series I called Cheesy Bites that I tried out last year, where I hope to produce shorter, easy to make videos, but completely failed at. The blue one is when I open up devices and has this color because I used to use the underside of my mouse mat, so it's a little callback to that time. Then we have the main gray background, which is, you guessed it, gray because of my original table. It's not the same shade, but I think it works well enough. Using these backdrops also gives me the infinity look by hiding the corners to avoid creating shadows. The shots look infinite, which is something I was keen on achieving last year. I then place whatever I make a video about on the table and try to frame it as best as I can. This can again be a longer process. I'm a sucker for symmetry and try to get everything as aligned as possible in camera, but sometimes having something a little crooked actually works out pretty well. But as much as I try my best to get things as close to perfection as possible, there are situations like placing an item dead center on a table that can be almost impossible to achieve, but there's a much easier way to get that, which I'll get to later in the editing part of this video. Whenever I can, I also try to get every motion as smooth as possible. I will attempt multiple takes until I get that one where it is the most uninterrupted. Occasionally I do feel a little silly though, as I repeatedly plug my PS5 in the middle of the night. But after a while you will start to get the hang of it and figure out what works and what doesn't work for you, and you'll know how to achieve what you envisioned by simply failing and trying again with a different approach. You might also develop stylistic choices that go against the norm. For example, creating depth in a shot is very important, to have something in the fore or background to create a visually much more interesting and pleasing scene. I sort of refuse to do that in certain scenarios, like I have a dedicated camera mounted for top-down shots, which is great for handling items, but because of the plain grey background, it can also look and feel very sterile. A lot of people will place various items on the table to mitigate something like this, which is a proven method, but I had this idea at some point to have as few elements on screen as possible, and at least for now I am sticking to it most of the time, even if it is sometimes a little ugly. Another question I frequently get asked about framing is how to get better at it, and my response might be a little underwhelming because it's practice all the time, and I really mean all the time. Since I've started making YouTube videos, I began to record everything in and outside YouTube. Okay, maybe not everything, but almost everything. So take the camera everywhere you go, day trips, weekend trips, holidays, and even family gatherings. Just film everything, and if you can, use the same camera. It's the best way to become more familiar with your gear and its limits. Even if you never end up using the footage, which is often the case with me, you will get better and faster, and you will start to know how to get the image that you want. In the end, you must become that annoying person in the group, the one who's always carrying and filming everyone. Trust me, I've gotten more than one angry look from my closest friends and families, a big sigh or an elongated eye roll. I've experienced them all. So let's take a moment to thank them. Thank you for being stand-ins for my gadget port. Alright, up until now I entirely skipped on talking about the actual cameras because I think it really doesn't matter, kind of. You probably heard the phrase gear doesn't matter when it comes to making videos, which I actually disagree with. What people are getting at with this sentence is that better gear doesn't necessarily produce better content, which I do agree with, but it can make a difference if it is more tailored to the way that you work. Think of it like mechanical keyboard switches. Some people like tactiles, some linears, and one person out there likes clickies. None is better than the other, and in this day and age, most cameras can produce fantastic results. The key is to figure out what you want most from your camera and to find the one that does that the best. For me, it was clear that I needed a rock-solid autofocus, which is why I ended up with two Sony FX30s. Before that, I had a Sigma FP, which does have better image quality, but the autofocus was such a pain that I ended up always operating it in manual mode. For overhead shots, I needed to stay within range, otherwise I lost focus. With the Sonys, this has become a non-issue. I no longer have to think about it, and there are other bonuses like tracking, breathing compensation, as well as being able to monitor the feed via any of my smart devices, which is something I never want to give up anymore. But it doesn't create better images, it doesn't make better movies, but it makes it easier to make them. A phone can be just as good though, but it comes down to how you like to work and what's important to you, which you'll find out by, yeah, you guessed it, practicing and gaining experience. Anyway, equipped with my weapons of choice, I go through the shot list until I'm done. After that, it is finally time to record the voiceover. I always do this after filming because a lot of times I will notice more things during the process, which I then incorporate into the script last minute. Recording voiceover is again a skill that will take time to develop. However, the most important tip I can give you is to talk as normally as you can. If you try to change your voice, you're never going to be able to recreate it consistently. Sometimes you might also need to go back and re-record a portion, and if it doesn't match with the rest, it's going to sound terrible. It's also good to do a little warm-up before you start recording, otherwise the beginning of the video is going to sound very different from the ending. I do this by simply reading the entire script out loud once again. That way I also do a final screening and kind of know what to expect. Try to also find the right pacing. I once experimented by talking faster than usual in a video, which really didn't work, and then did the opposite, which was even worse. Find a good middle ground, one that is again easy to read without you having to do multiple takes for every paragraph. Speaking of paragraphs, big ones can be really difficult to read without mistakes, so just split them up and glue them back together in post. That's what I do. Alright, it's time to offload all the audio, footage, and begin with the most fun part of production, which is post-production. I don't want to delve too deep into details like which editing software to use. I think the choice comes down to the same criteria as with the cameras. It has to work for you. The thing I will be talking about, however, are in regards to what I learned along the way and can hopefully be applied to any software or tools that you use. Let's begin with the import of all the recorded clips, which might sound like a really boring and negligible task, but I can't stress enough how important this is. For the Witcher 1 review, I recorded a total of 130 clips. In the beginning, I used to just dump everything into a single folder, and during the assembly, look for each clip individually. This is incredibly slow and can get tiresome really fast. Browsing through endless seas of clips in search for the one that you just saw a minute ago is super annoying. Organization is key when it comes to making videos, and having a folder structure to group clips that belong together makes editing life so much easier. I don't have a template for this. I usually just dump everything into the root directory and then work myself through, creating folders one by one as I see fit. Some clips for the intro, some for that section where I talk about the screen. You get the picture. Once done, the next step becomes much more streamlined. It's where I take the recorded voiceover and begin adding the corresponding clip scene by scene. It's here where my second tip comes into play. Learn your shortcuts. This might sound benign, but having shortcuts for defaults like transitions, cutting, moving, selecting, and so on can really make a difference. It makes editing a breeze, and you'll be able to work much closer to the pace you want while avoiding searching through menus for clips or fonts and effects. I understand, however, that it will take some time to not only learn the shortcuts, but to also create them and, more importantly, figure out which ones you actually need. My roster is still changing too. Only last year I learned that there is a default transition that can be used by hitting Ctrl-T and that you can set a default duration for it as well. Before that, I always went to the effects library, dragged the transition to my clips, and then manually adjusted the length. There are other small things that you might not know that exist, or at least I didn't, like moving around text elements. For the longest time, I thought using the coordinates in the inspector was the only way, but no, you can switch to the transform tool and just drag it around. These things might sound obvious, but if you've never done something like this before, which was sort of the case for me, you don't know about these features until you actually need them, and they can really make a difference. Editing styles also vary very much between everyone. Some like to just drop all the clips in at once and then work through them. I like to go about it chronologically, and while doing so I want to get as much done as I move down the timeline, including grading, effects, text elements, and memes. Once I arrive at the end, it's time to begin the long, tormenting procedure of detailing. This means fixing smaller errors, double-checking links and text, making sure all the colors match between the clips and that everything is properly aligned. As I talked about in the previous chapter, I try to get the shots as good as I can in camera, but let's take the example of placing an item down in the center of the table again. Doing this is super difficult, but using my handy little grid overlay here, which is something you can just drag onto the timeline and configure with DaVinci, I can check out how good of a job I actually did. If it needs adjustment, I just crop in a little bit, like on the final image here, and then boom, I look like I know what I'm doing.
Perfection.
I go through every single clip like this, and chances are that at least every second, if not every clip, is a tiny little bit cropped in just to align it perfectly. This can range from just centering it to downright changing the perspective. It's also great for fixing small mistakes and removing unwanted elements that you didn't see during the shoot, which happens more often than I'd like to admit. Again, most of this will get more natural with time. At the beginning, it's best to experiment with what works for you and what you end up liking. Nobody's asking that everything is perfectly centered, but I kinda just like it that way. The same goes for which transitions to use, how you like your scenes to change, and the duration between them. Experiment, adapt, and improve. It's an endless process, and I probably changed something in every single video since the first upload, and I'm still doing it. At some point though, an initial first version is ready, like a rough cut. Now it's time to take a look at the piece as a whole and get a feel for it, and if it needs any bigger adjustments. Once that is complete, we are nearing the end, and it's time to go through the final checklist. First, I will go through every text element one last time by copying it into a Google Docs file. The reason? To check for spelling mistakes. I don't know if there is an easier way to do this, but Grammarly really doesn't like to read DaVinci Resolve, so this is the best method that I came up with. You'd be surprised how often a gnarly mistake sneaks itself into the edit. After that, it's time to export the video and upload the first final version to YouTube. We'll get into the metadata and other details in just a minute, as this serves a different purpose, and that is screening. At this point, the video should be nearly done, and I've probably watched it about 20 to 30 times, and I'm just about to go insane, so it's perfect that I will have to watch it again on almost every screen that I own through YouTube. This means checking it on a TV, my iPhone, iPad, and of course the almighty desktop. The purpose is to check how the video looks, sounds and feels on all these platforms and how the colors appear. I've made mistakes in the past and I'm trying to avoid another darkness disaster. I would also recommend checking the audio on speakers and headphones. Certain sounds like dings or cache registers, which I use often, can be very harsh, so I tone it down quite a bit to make sure I'm not going to cause any injuries. All these efforts aren't foolproof though. I have seen very obvious mistakes weeks and months after the initial upload. And the reason is simple. After working for about 30 to 40 hours on a video, you simply don't see them anymore. But the beauty is, if you made it this far, it means that the video is nearly done, and now it's time to get it out there for everyone to enjoy it. Or hate it. Some people will really hate it. This last chapter is the least interesting in my opinion, but unfortunately one of the most important ones. I say unfortunately because I really don't like coming up with titles and thumbnails. I also think that I'm really not that good at it. I heard that some video ideas even come from titles and thumbnails, and are then sort of reverse engineered, which is a process that could not feel more foreign to me. But let's start with the title first. The way I approach it is by again asking myself, what would I click on, or more importantly, what would I have searched for where I would have wanted to see this video in the results? I then try to come up with something that matches that in a more readable form. With the thumbnail, I always end up taking a screen grab and then starting to edit it. Sometimes I will make it a little brighter and more vibrant in the hopes of making it stick out in the crowd. I also try to come up with a catchy slogan in the hopes of making it more clickable. I struggle with this the most, so if you have any suggestions that don't involve a YouTube face, please let me know because I think I need some help. Nothing is permanent though, and I often change both after the initial publication, even multiple times, especially when a video isn't doing so well. There are ways to do A/B testing, which means creating two versions and then checking which ones are getting more clicks, but this feature isn't available for every channel yet. For now, I would have to resort to external tools like TubeBuddy, which I'm currently not subscribed to. The reason is that the free version gives me enough insights to make adjustments, and the A/B testing feature is something only available on the highest tier, which is really expensive. I honestly don't think these plugins are worth it. I had TubeBuddy for about a year and wasn't really satisfied. I also tried out vidIQ, but unless you have the funds to get all the features, I think your money is better invested somewhere else. The rest of the metadata is pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go into more details here. The only interesting tidbit might be that everything on this channel has been released via scheduling. I've never uploaded something that was immediately published. Every YouTube video and every Instagram post was always scheduled. Speaking of Instagram, all of the pictures you see there are, just like the thumbnail, screen grabs and scheduled using a service called later.com. It might come across as lazy to not have dedicated photos, but the simple fact is, I don't have time. Since I dialed back on the keyboard related content, the Instagram page has also suffered quite a bit. Regular tech gadgets are much less interesting, and posting multiple angles of an analog stick just doesn't seem like worthwhile content. Alright, I think that should cover distribution. I know I should not treat this as an afterthought because the discoverability of videos is so important, but I'm still trying to get the hang of this, even after 3 years, and I must admit there's still lots of room to improve. But once this step has been completed, a YouTube video made it out of the gates, and that is one of the most satisfying and exciting moments. It's where for a short amount of time, the one in between projects, I get to lean back a bit and enjoy a moment of peace. That is until the realization hits that after a project is before a project and it's time to start again. One of the most satisfying parts about making YouTube videos is that each part is so different from the last. When I begin writing, I usually am very excited because I just came from an editing marathon and the last thing I want to do is edit more videos. But just about 10 hours in, I don't really want to write anymore. I want to get up and do something else, which is perfect because it's time to film. And guess what? After 10 hours of filming, I've just had about enough of cameras and I want to sit down again. The reason why I love editing the most is also that it is the least draining. At this point, most of the video is defined and it's now a simple assembly process, which I find quite relaxing. But enough about that, let's talk numbers and how the start of this channel looked like and how it is faring today. The first video was uploaded on January 14th, 2021, and up until around August, I released a total of 6 videos while somehow convincing 81 people to join the cheese train. Then came the first successful video, which was about the Meshlicious PC case, and later the NuFi Air 96 video. Both changed the trajectory quite a bit, and by the end of the year, I had reached my goal of 1,000 subscribers. This yielded me a satisfying sum of around 322 Swiss francs, which is about $380 US, which I'll be using as currency from here on out, as it's probably easier to reference. But as you can see, the first 7 months of this channel were really quiet, and it's something that I knew going into. It's also something to be aware of. Don't get discouraged by this. Chances are it's gonna take a while until YouTube finds your audience. What I mean by that is, the algorithm needs to figure out which user base is most interested in your work so it can recommend it to them. That's why they also say you need to pick a niche, that way it can pinpoint your audience better. I do think there is an audience for everyone though. Some are just easier to find than others. So if you don't get a viral hit from the get-go, it can take a while before you get any traction. Reaching 1,000 subs within the first year was something I didn't expect, even if it was a goal. Looking at the graph for the second year, we see something very similar. Again, around August, this time September actually, there was a hit which was the I Wish I Knew video about custom keyboards. This once again catapulted the channel onto a new level, reaching the unbelievable 10k sub mark within the second year and making over 2 grand by the end of 2022. If we now move over to the last year, the graph changes even more, riding into 2023 with the continued success of the I Wish I Knew video. As you can see, I also uploaded way more, but overall the channel growth slowed down. That is not to say that it didn't go well. 2023 has been great, and with an income of almost 3 grand, we are looking at around $250 per month, which is incredibly fortunate. This also for the first time included super likes, which happened a few times and is something I'm really grateful for. I have to mention though that I don't have all the monetization options enabled. None of my videos except 4 from the first year have any mid-roll ads. Why I haven't enabled them is simple. I hate mid-rolls. I think they destroy the flow of the video and I really don't like them. I don't care if it would yield more income. I feel the same about the non-skippable ads, but unfortunately YouTube has started to force them in 2023, so it is no longer up to the channel owners. The reason why I have mid-rolls enabled on some of my older videos though is because I read somewhere that YouTube likes ads, and if you have mid-rolls, they can make more money from it and will therefore recommend the video more. But that turned out to be false, at least for me. Changing monetization settings did nothing. Next to AdSense, there are also other financial income streams. I've had 2 sponsored videos, I believe. Both were in the low 3-digit range, but I've since declined to do any more because I don't feel like selling you something and the right sponsor just hasn't shown up yet. Then there are the affiliate links. Sometimes they work pretty well, but mostly around product launches. After that, people don't seem to be clicking on them that much. I still have them in the description though to get the occasional kickback. But collectively, I started to make enough these days that I try to buy every product for the channel with funds earned by the channel. This can sometimes be a challenge, but one way to help with that is to sell everything that I no longer need. I've started to do that to get a little bit of a cushion for bad times. That way I can buy something when it comes out, like the Legion Go here, which there will be an upcoming video about. Another way to get these is by buying them used, like the Legion Go here, which I got used with a pretty good discount. Another financial tidbit you should not forget about are taxes. Remember those 3 grand I made in 2023? Well, what I received in the end wasn't actually that amount. There are several fees involved which can vary depending on where you live. The final number for 2023 was actually $2,600, so about 14% less. I also have to declare everything I make on YouTube as income, so it's not just Google that takes a bite out of my cheesecake, but also the state. But I don't know the final amount for that yet, as I haven't gotten the bill. I hope my slightly less exciting tone doesn't come across as negative. I am aware that I'm in an incredibly fortunate situation, but sometimes it does hurt a little seeing the numbers get smaller and smaller until they show up in my account. But when it comes down to it, the main driving force behind everything is passion. The passion I have for making videos, for playing around with gadgets and having the urge to find out how they work. That, and of course the incredibly warm reception I get from you. I love YouTube, I always have, and I think I will continue to do so for a very long time because it's just such a fascinating platform, and making videos for it has been one of my most rewarding experiences. It also taught me a lot about dealing with criticism. I do get the occasional nasty comment, and at the beginning these were quite frightening, and you have to get used to people simply not agreeing with you or downright hating whatever you made. But I think it also grounds me and reminds me that my opinion isn't the only one and that I don't know everything. One of the most exciting parts is actually learning new things from you folks. I'll even lean into this sometimes and ask if anyone knows more, and usually that is the case, which is not surprising because I am a big buffoon. In the end, I'm just another user, except that I share my experience in the form of a video. But luckily, the majority of feedback I get is positive. I love it when it is about production or how I can improve it, but I also appreciate all the straightforward kindness. So thank you to everyone who took the time to write and say something, regardless of whether or not it is feedback or just sharing your experiences or opinions. And thank you for watching all the videos, including this one. I hope it met your expectations. Otherwise, you know what to do. Anyway, thank you so much for watching till the end, and thank you so much for the great 2023. Thank you for riding along, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye!